The docking bay of the Stellar Dominion stretched before Captain Elena Vasquez, like a cathedral of chrome and starlight. At barely 5 feet 4 inches, she felt dwarfed by the massive alien architecture, but her shoulders remained straight, and her expression composed. 20 years commanding deep space reconnaissance missions had taught her that confidence was often the only weapon that mattered. "So this is the famous human representative," rumbled a voice that seemed to emanate from the deck plates themselves. Elena turned to face her escort, a towering Zephyrian whose crystalline exoskeleton caught and refracted the ambient light into prismatic rainbows. Standing nearly 9 feet tall, Kepha resembled a walking Giada crossed with a praying mantis, his forearms ending in delicate manipulator claws that could crush steel. "Captain Elena Vasquez, Earth Diplomatic Corps," she replied, extending her hand in the universal gesture of greeting. "Though I suspect you already knew that." Kepha's compound eyes shifted through several colors surprise. If she remembered her xenobiology briefings correctly, "You offer physical contact to a stranger? Your species truly lacks survival instincts. Where I come from, a handshake is how we show trust," Elena said, maintaining her extended hand. "Unless you're afraid of a little human contact." The crystalline being's mandibles clicked in what she hoped was amusement, rather than irritation. After a moment's hesitation, he reached out with one of his secondary arms, his claw gently grasping her much smaller hand. The contact was surprisingly warm, and Elena felt the faint vibration of his internal harmonics, a sign of curiosity among his people. "Fascinating," Kepha murmured, releasing her hand. "You show no fear, despite being surrounded by beings who could end your existence with minimal effort." "Fear's overrated," Elena replied with a slight smile. "Besides, if you wanted me dead, I'd already be space dust. The fact that I'm breathing suggests you need something from humanity." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Ambassador Quintel, a serpentine being whose iridescent scales shifted between deep purples and golds. Unlike the imposing Zephyrian, the ambassador moved with fluid grace, his 6 arms gesturing in elaborate patterns that Elena recognized as formal diplomatic protocol. "Captain Vasquez," Quintel said, his voice melodic and precise, "welcome aboard the Stellar Dominion. I trust your journey from Earth was adequate." "It had its moments," Elena replied diplomatically. "Though I have to admit, your invitation came as quite a surprise. Last I checked, humanity wasn't exactly on the Galactic Assembly's priority list." "Circumstances change," the ambassador said, his tail coiling and uncoiling in a pattern that suggested discomfort. "Recent developments have made the Assembly reconsider certain assessments regarding your species." Elena caught the careful phrasing. "You mean you've realized we might be useful after all?" Kepha's harmonic vibrations increased, definitely amusement this time. "The human is direct, Ambassador. I find this refreshing after cycles of diplomatic obfuscation." "Indeed," Quintel agreed, though his scales had shifted to a more muted tone. "Captain, if you would follow me. The Assembly Council is eager to meet with you. Though I should warn you, not all members share Kepha's appreciation for human directness." As they moved through the corridors of the massive vessel, Elena took careful note of everything around her. The ship was a marvel of engineering. Organic curves blended seamlessly with geometric precision, creating spaces that felt both alien and strangely familiar. Crew members of various species moved about their duties, most casting curious glances at the human in their midst. "How many species are represented on this ship?" Elena asked as they passed a group of beings that looked like walking coral formations. 47 distinct species from across the galaxy," Quintel replied with obvious pride. "The Stellar Dominion serves as both flagship and symbol of galactic unity, under the Assembly's guidance." "Impressive," Elena said, though she noticed the careful way certain species gave others a wide berth, and everyone gets along perfectly. "I'm sure unity does not require uniformity," the ambassador said carefully. "Each species contributes according to their strengths and abilities." "And what exactly do you think humanity's strengths are?" Elena asked. The question hung in the air as they approached a massive set of doors decorated with symbols from dozens of worlds. Kepha and Quintel exchanged what might have been meaningful glances. though Elena found alien body language difficult to interpret. "That," Quintel said finally, "is what we intend to determine." The doors opened with a soft whisper of displaced air, revealing a chamber that took Elena's breath away. The assembly hall was enormous, with tiers of seating arranged in concentric circles around a central platform. Representatives from dozens of species filled the seats, their attention focused on the small human who had just entered their domain. But what truly caught Elena's attention were the whispered conversations that ceased as soon as she appeared. She caught fragments in the few alien languages she understood, words like predator, dangerous, and most intriguingly, Apex. "Captain Vasquez," Quintel announced formally, "the Galactic Assembly recognizes your presence as representative of the human species." Elena stepped forward onto the central platform, acutely aware of the hundreds of alien eyes focused on her. She'd addressed hostile governments, negotiated with pirates, and stared down the barrel of more weapons than she cared to count. But something about this moment felt different, charged with a significance she couldn't quite grasp. "The honored representatives," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "Humanity is grateful for this opportunity to address the Assembly. We come seeking understanding, cooperation, and perhaps most importantly, the chance to prove that despite our recent rival on the galactic stage, we have something valuable to contribute." A ripple of what might have been approval moved through some sections of the audience, while others remained pointedly silent. Elena noticed that the largest and most intimidating species seemed to be watching her with particular interest. "We have heard much about human capabilities," said a voice from the upper tiers. The speaker was massive, easily 12 feet tall, with what appeared to be natural armor plating and eyes that glowed with an inner fire. "Tell us, small human, what makes your species believe it deserves a place among the stars?" Elena met the being's gaze steadily. "Because we're still here," she said simply. "Despite everything the universe has thrown at us, despite our flaws and our mistakes, humanity endures. We adapt, we survive, and when necessary, we fight." The chamber fell silent. Elena could hear her own heartbeat in the sudden quiet, and for a moment, she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Then, from somewhere in the highest tier of seating, came a sound that made every alien in the chamber freeze, a deep, resonant growl that seemed to acknowledge something in Elena's words. The sound of an apex predator showing interest. The diplomatic reception following Elena's address buzzed with tension and curiosity. Representatives from dozens of worlds mingled in the grand hall, their conversations a symphony of clicks, whistles, and harmonic tones. Elena found herself the center of attention, though she noticed how most beings kept a respectful or perhaps wary distance. "Captain Vasquez," purred a voice beside her. Elena turned to find herself facing a being that resembled a cross between a cat and a butterfly, with iridescent fur and gossamer wings. "I am Council Member Gila of the Feline Collective. Your speech was most provocative." "I prefer honest," Elena replied, accepting a crystalline cup containing something that glowed softly blue. "Humanity has learned that sugar-coating the truth rarely leads to lasting relationships. Indeed, though I wonder if your species truly understands what survival means on a galactic scale." Gila's whiskers twitched with what Elena interpreted as amusement. "Out here, being an apex predator carries implications." Before Elena could ask what she meant, a sudden hush fell over the gathering. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees, and Elena noticed that every being in her immediate vicinity had taken several careful steps backward. "What's happening?" Elena whispered to Gila, but the feline being had already melted away into the crowd. Her answer came in the form of footsteps, heavy, measured, and somehow both graceful and intimidating. Elena turned toward the source of the sound and felt her breath catch in her throat. The being approaching her was unlike anything in her xenobiology files. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, he moved with the fluid power of a born predator. His form was vaguely humanoid, but built on an entirely different scale, broad shoulders tapering to a narrow waist, long limbs that spoke of both speed and strength. His skin was deep obsidian, marked with intricate silver patterns that seemed to shift and flow in the ambient light. Most striking were his eyes, ancient gold that held an intelligence as vast as it was unsettling. "So," he said, his voice a low rumble that Elena felt as much as heard. "You are the human who speaks of endurance." Elena forced herself to stand straighter, meeting those golden eyes directly. "Captain Elena Vasquez," she said, extending her hand as she had with Kepher, "and you are for a moment." The being simply stared at her outstretched hand. Round them, Elena could hear the sharp intake of breath from various species. Apparently, offering to shake hands with this particular alien was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. "I am Raxthul," he said finally, reaching out with a hand that could have easily encompassed both of hers. His fingers were long and elegant, ending in what appeared to be retractable claws currently sheathed. "Primary hunter of the void. Stalkers, first among the Apex Council." His touch was surprisingly gentle, and Elena felt a strange warmth where their skin made contact. "A pleasure to meet you, Raxthul. Though I'm guessing from everyone's reaction that this isn't a typical social encounter." Raxthul's expression shifted. She caught the barest hint of what might have been a smile. "The Void Stalkers do not typically engage in social encounters, as you put it. We are what your kind might call the monsters that other monsters fear. Everyone needs friends," Elena said with deliberate lightness. "Even monsters." This time, Raxthul's smile was unmistakable, revealing teeth that were clearly designed for tearing rather than grinding. "Your species is either incredibly foolish or remarkably brave. I find myself curious to determine which." "Why not both?" Elena suggested, and was rewarded with what sounded suspiciously like a chuckle. "Indeed. Tell me, Captain Elena Vasquez of Earth, what do you know of predators?" Elena considered the question carefully. Round them, the reception continued, but she noticed that a wide circle had formed with her and Raxthul at the center. "I know that true predators don't waste energy on unnecessary displays of dominance. They're efficient, patient, and they understand their place in the ecosystem. And you believe humans are predators? I believe humans are whatever they need to be to survive," Elena replied. "We were prey once, hiding in caves from things with bigger teeth and claws. But we learned, we adapted, and eventually, we became the hunters instead of the hunted." Raxthul circled her slowly, his movement reminiscent of a large cat sizing up potential prey. Elena forced herself to remain still, though every instinct screamed at her to run. "You show no fear," he observed. "Unterrified," Elena admitted. "Honestly, but fear can be useful if you don't let it control you." "Wisdom," Raxthul murmured, stopping directly in front of her. "You interest me, Elena Vasquez. Your species was contacted by the Assembly not for your technology or your resources, but for your potential." "What kind of potential?" "The galaxy faces a threat that conventional warfare cannot address, an enemy that adapts to energy weapons, that phases through physical barriers, that feeds on the very essence of reality itself." His golden eyes seemed to burn with intensity. "The Assembly believes humanity might possess the necessary flexibility to help combat this threat." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with Raxthul's predatory presence. "And what do you believe?" "I believe," Raxthul said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "that humanity's greatest strength may also be its greatest danger. You are apex predators who have not yet realized what you are. Is that why you're talking to me? To help us realize our potential, perhaps, or perhaps I simply find myself drawn to another predator who understands the weight of standing at the top of the food chain." There was something in his tone that made Elena look at him more closely, a hint of loneliness that resonated with something deep in her chest. "It can be isolating," she said softly, "being the thing others fear." Raxthul's eyes widened slightly, and Elena realized she'd touched on something significant. "You speak as one who knows. Command is lonely, regardless of species," Elena replied. "When you're responsible for making the hard choices, for being the weapon others point at their problems, it's easy to forget that you're more than just a tool." The silence that followed was charged with understanding. Round them, Elena was dimly aware that the reception was continuing, but her focus was entirely on the ancient predator before her. There was something about Raxthul beyond the obvious physical power, beyond the reputation that clearly preceded him that called to her. "Walk with me," Raxthul said suddenly. there are things you should see. If you are to understand what the assembly truly asks of your species." Elena nodded, and together they moved through the crowd. Other beings parted before them like water, some bowing respectfully to Raxthul, others simply getting out of the way as quickly as possible. Elena found herself matching his pace. There, steps falling into an oddly comfortable rhythm. The void beyond the galactic rim, Raxthul said as they walked, is not empty as your scientists believe. It teems with entities that exist beyond normal spacetime, beings that view our reality as nothing more than a feeding ground. The threat you mentioned, they call themselves the Silence, though that is merely our translation of a concept that has no equivalent in any known language. They consume not just matter and energy, but existence itself. Entire star systems have simply ceased to be. Elena felt her tactical mind engaging, despite the surreal nature of the conversation. "How do you fight something like that?" Raxthul said, stopping before a massive viewport that showed the star field beyond. "Is what we hope your species might help us discover. The Void Stalkers have managed to hold them at bay, but we are few, and they are infinite." Elena stared out at the stars, processing the implications. "You're hoping human unpredictability might be the key to finding a solution the galaxy's greatest. Minds have missed. Intelligence alone is insufficient. The Silence adapts to logical patterns, learns from conventional tactics, but chaos." Raxthul's reflection in the viewport seemed to smile. "Chaos is far more difficult to predict or counter, and you think humans are chaotic enough to make a difference?" "I think," Raxthul said, turning to face her fully, "that humanity represents something the galaxy has not seen in eons. A species with the potential to become apex predators, without losing their capacity for growth and change." Elena met his gaze, feeling the weight of unspoken implications. There was something building between them, not just intellectual curiosity or strategic alliance, but something deeper, something that transcended species boundaries. "This conversation feels like it's heading somewhere significant," Elena said carefully. "Indeed it is," Raxthul replied, his voice carrying a warmth that hadn't been there before. "Tell me, Elena Vasquez, are you prepared to discover what humanity truly is?" 3 days had passed since Elena's first encounter with Raxthul, and she found herself thinking about the enigmatic Void Stalker, far more than diplomatic protocol probably warranted. Their conversations had become a daily occurrence, each meeting revealing new layers to both the galactic situation and to Raxthul himself. This morning, she'd received an invitation to join him in what he called his contemplation chamber, a private space aboard the stellar Dominion that few beings had ever been permitted to enter. Elena found herself in a corridor she'd never seen before, deeper in the ship's structure than her security clearance should have allowed. The walls here were different organic curves that seemed to pulse with a faint bioluminescence, creating an atmosphere that was both beautiful and slightly unsettling. "You came." Raxthul's voice emerged from the shadows ahead. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Elena asked, continuing forward until she found him standing before a door that seemed to be grown rather than built. "I hoped," he admitted, and something in his tone made her look at him more closely. In the soft light, the silver patterns on his obsidian skin seemed more pronounced, and she realized they weren't tattoos or markings, but some kind of natural bioluminescence. The door opened at his touch, revealing a space that took Elena's breath away. The chamber was circular, with what appeared to be living walls that curved up into a domed ceiling. Bioluminescent nodes provided gentle illumination, but the most striking feature was the flora transparent surface that offered an unobstructed view of the stars beyond. "It's beautiful," Elena whispered, stepping carefully onto the transparent floor. The sensation of walking among the stars was both exhilarating and vertigo-inducing. "This is where I come to remember," Raxthul said, moving to stand beside her. "The vastness of space has a way of putting things in perspective." Elena noticed that his usual predatory grace seemed more relaxed here, less controlled. "What do you need to remember? That I am more than just a weapon," he said quietly. "That before the assembly found us, before we became the galaxy's shield against the dark, the Void Stalkers were explorers, philosophers, artists. What changed?" Raxthul was quiet for so long that Elena wondered if she'd overstepped some boundary. finally. He spoke. The first silence incursion was 12 centuries ago. A scouting probe from beyond the rim made contact with a peaceful research station in what you would call the Andromeda Spiral. Within hours, the entire system simply wasn't there anymore. Elena felt a chill despite the chamber's warmth. And the assembly asked your people to investigate. They begged us to, Raxthul corrected, his golden eyes reflecting the starlight beneath their feet. The Void Stalkers were already known as the most effective hunters in the galaxy. Who else would they turn to when faced with the ultimate predator? But hunting the silence cost you something, everything. He said simply, to fight entities that exist beyond normal reality. We had to become something beyond normal ourselves. We gave up our home world, our families, our individual identities. We became living weapons in service to galactic survival. Elena reached out instinctively, her hand covering his where it rested against the curved wall. His skin was surprisingly warm, and she felt that same strange tingle of connection she'd experienced during their first handshake. I'm sorry, she said. That's a hell of a sacrifice. Is it sacrifice if there was no choice? Raxthul asked. But he didn't pull his hand away from hers. Sometimes I wonder what my life might have been if the silence had never come. If I could have remained simply Raxthul, instead of becoming primary hunter Raxthul. You're still just Raxthul to me, Elena said, surprised by her own boldness. Titles are just words. They don't define who you are inside. He turned to face her fully, and Elena was struck by the vulnerability in his ancient eyes. You see me differently than others do. I see someone who's been carrying an impossible burden for far too long, Elena replied. Someone who's forgotten that he's allowed to be more than just his duty. And what do you see when you look? In the mirror, Elena Vasquez, the question was gentle but pointed. Do you see a diplomat, or do you see the weapon your government has aimed at the stars? Elena felt the question hit closer to home than she was comfortable with. Both, I suppose. The line between diplomat and soldier gets pretty blurry when you're negotiating with a gun to your head, which is why the assembly chose you, Raxthul said. Moving closer, not just humanity, but you specifically. They needed someone who could understand predators, who could think like one when necessary. And what do you need? Elena asked, the question slipping out before she could stop herself. Raxthul's expression shifted, something raw and honest flickering across his features. I need to remember what it feels like to be seen as more than a monster, to be wanted for something other than my ability to kill. The honesty in his voice made Elena's chest tighten. Without thinking, she stepped closer, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest. She could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, proof that despite his fearsome reputation, he was as alive and vulnerable as anyone else. You're not a monster, Raxthul, she said firmly. You're someone who made impossible choices to protect others. There's nothing monstrous about that. Even when those choices have made me into something that others fear. Fear can come from respect, Elena said, thinking of her own experiences commanding difficult missions. The beings who step back when you enter a room, they're not just afraid of your power. They're in awe of someone who willingly took on burdens they couldn't handle themselves. Raxthul's hand came up to cover hers where it rested on his chest. You have no idea what you're saying, Elena. The things I've done. The compromises I've made in the name of galactic security. Do you regret them? No. He said immediately. I would make the same choices again if necessary. Then you're exactly the kind of person, being whatever, Elena corrected with a slight smile, that I respect most. Someone who does what needs to be done, even when it costs them everything. They stood in silence for a moment, the starlight beneath their feet painting shifting patterns across their forms. Elena was acutely aware of their proximity, of the warmth radiating from Raxthul's powerful frame, of the way his golden eyes seemed to hold depths she could spend lifetimes exploring. This is complicated, Raxthul said finally, though he made no move to step away. The best things usually are, Elena replied. The question is whether it's worth the complication. You would risk your diplomatic mission for this, he gestured. Between them, and Elena could hear the carefully controlled hope in his voice. My mission is to determine whether humanity has a place in galactic society, Elena said. Maybe that includes determining whether individual humans can find connections. that transcends species boundaries. Raxthuel's other hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. You realize that what you're suggesting would be unprecedented. The Assembly has strict protocols about interspecies relationships, especially involving void stalkers. Since when do apex predators follow other people's rules? Elena challenged, leaning into his touch that earned her one of his rare, genuine smiles, the kind that transformed his entire face and made her forget that others considered him the most dangerous being in the galaxy. You, he said softly, are going to be the death of me. Elena Vasquez. Not if I can help it, she replied, rising up on her toes to close the distance between them. Their kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of crossing a line they couldn't uncross. But as Elena felt Raxthuel respond, felt the careful control he maintained slip just slightly, she deepened the contact. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Elena, Raxthuel said, his voice rough with emotion, there are things about my species, about what I am, that you don't understand. Getting close to me could be dangerous. Everything worthwhile is dangerous, Elena replied, her hands still resting against his chest. The question is whether you think I'm worth the risk. Raxthuel's answer came in the form of another kiss, this one deeper, more certain. And as Elena lost herself in the warmth of his embrace, surrounded by the light of distant stars, she realized that her mission to the stars had become something far more personal than she'd ever imagined. Elena's private communication with Earth Command was interrupted by an urgent summons. To the Assembly's War Council, the message had come directly from Raxthuel, marked with security codes she didn't recognize and a single line. The silence has moved. Your presence is required. She found herself in a chamber deep within the Stellar Dominion's military section, surrounded by the galaxy's most senior commanders. General Murdox, a massive arachnid-like being with 8 articulated limbs, stood at the center of a holographic display that showed star charts Elena had never seen before. Dr. Zillanth, a ethereal being that seemed to be composed more of energy than matter, floated nearby with various scientific instruments orbiting her translucent form. But it was Raxthuel's presence that drew her attention. He stood apart from the others, his usual controlled demeanor replaced by something that looked almost like barely contained fury. Captain Vasquez, General Murdoch's voice was like grinding stone. Thank you for responding so quickly. We have a situation that requires immediate consultation. What kind of situation? Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew. 3 hours ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected this, Dr. Zillanth said, her form pulsing as she manipulated the holographic display. The image that appeared made Elena's blood run cold. What had once been a thriving solar system, 5 planets orbiting a yellow star, not unlike Earth's sun, was now simply gone, not destroyed, not reduced to debris, but completely absent. Space itself seemed to ripple and distort where the system should have been. The Kepler 440 system, General Murdoch explained, home to 6 billion beings across 3 inhabited worlds. As of 0800 hours Galactic Standard Time, it no longer exists. The silence, Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. A full manifestation, Raxthuel said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Not a probe or scout, but a mature entity, something we haven't seen in over 2 centuries. Elena studied the display, her tactical mind trying to process the implications. How is this possible? I thought your people had been holding them back. We have, Raxthuel replied, but the nature of the silence makes them difficult to predict. They exist partially outside normal spacetime, which means they can bypass our defenses in ways we don't always anticipate. Dr. Zillanth's form flickered with agitation. Our analysis suggests this was a targeted incursion, not a random feeding. The silence chose this system for a specific reason. What reason? Elena asked. General Murdoch manipulated the display, showing a series of data streams. The Kepler 440 system was one of our primary research facilities for studying silence technology. We had recovered artifacts from previous incursions, materials that we believed were safely contained. They came back for their toys, Elena realized. More than that, Raxthul said grimly. They demonstrated that nowhere in galaxy is truly safe from their reach. This was a message. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. A message saying what? That the rules of engagement have changed, Dr. Zilanth replied. For 12 centuries, the Silents have been content to probe our defenses, to test our responses. This was different. This was a declaration of war, General Murdoch confirmed. Which brings us to why you're here, Captain Vasquez. Elena looked around the chamber, noting the way all eyes were focused on her. You want humanity's help. We need it, Raxthul said bluntly. The conventional strategies that have worked for centuries are no longer sufficient. We need new approaches, new ways of thinking about an enemy that exists beyond our normal understanding of reality. And you think humans can provide that? I know you can, Raxthul replied. Stepping closer, Elena could see the intensity in his golden eyes, the faith he was placing in her species. Your people have a gift for improvisation, for finding solutions that others would never consider. It's what makes you dangerous, and it's what might save us all. Elena studied the holographic display again, her mind racing through possibilities. What do we know about silence technology? Their weaknesses. Dr. Zilanth pulsed brighter with excitement. That's where it becomes interesting. Traditional weapons are useless against them. They can phase through physical matter and adapt to energy signatures in real time. But there are exceptions, such as weapons or technologies that incorporate elements of chaos theory, the scientist explained. Random or unpredictable elements that the Silents cannot easily analyze or counter, like human tactics, Elena said, beginning to understand. Exactly, General Murdoch confirmed. Your species' tendency toward unpredictable behavior patterns could be the key to developing new weapons and strategies. Elena felt the weight of their expectations, the hope they were placing in humanity's potential. It was flattering and terrifying. In equal measure, what exactly are you asking for? Full military alliance, Raxthul said. Human tactical advisors integrated with our war councils. Human creativity applied to our weapons development. And he hesitated, glancing at the others, and Elena prompted. Joint operations, General Murdoch said. Human and Void Stalker teams working together on direct missions against silence incursions. Elena felt her heart skip. You're talking about putting human soldiers in direct combat with entities that can erase entire solar systems. We're talking about giving humanity the chance to prove itself as more than just another client species, Raxthul said quietly. To become true partners in defending the galaxy. The implications were staggering. Elena could already imagine the debates that would rage on Earth, the fear and excitement that such an offer would generate. Humanity had always dreamed of taking its place among the stars, but this was far beyond anything they'd imagined. There's something else, Dr. Zilanth said, her form dimming slightly. Our analysis of the Kepler 442 incident suggests the Silents are not just becoming more aggressive. They're becoming more intelligent. They're learning from our responses, adapting their strategies, which means they'll be ready for conventional countermeasures, Elena realized. But hopefully not for human unconventional countermeasures, Raxthul said with something that might have been a smile. Elena looked around the chamber at the assembled commanders. These beings who represented the pinnacle of galactic military power, and realized they were placing their faith in humanity's potential to think outside the box. I'll need to consult with Earth Command, she said finally. This kind of decision isn't mine to make alone. Of course, General Murdoch agreed. But time is not our ally. Our long-range sensors have detected anomalies in 17 other systems. If the Silents are preparing for a major offensive, how long do we have? Elena asked. Weeks, Raxthul said grimly. Maybe less. Elena felt the weight of the moment, the knowledge that her next words could determine not just humanity's future, but the fate of the entire galaxy. As she looked at Raxthul, she saw not just the fearsome primary hunter, but the being who had shown her vulnerability and trust in equal measure. I'll get you an answer, she said, but I want something in return. Name it, General Murdoch said. If humanity agrees to this alliance, we do it as equals, not as junior partners or expendable assets, but as full participants in whatever comes next. The commanders exchanged glances, and Elena held her breath. Agreed, Raxthuel said, and Elena could hear the promise in his voice, not just political, but personal. As the meeting dissolved and the various commanders departed, Raxthuel approached Elena. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "I know," Elena replied, acutely aware that he wasn't just talking about the military alliance. "Are you ready for that? With you as our partner?" Raxthuel's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "I'm ready for anything."